It's the fact that we were the first television show in history that actually played with your audience. I'm tied down with my hands like this. There's nothing to protect my face, and I have 2x4s landing on my head. Broke my nose.
He wasn't just Robin, the boy wonder. Behind the mask, Burt Ward's real life was far wilder than the campy world of Batman 66. Cast at only 20 years old, he was thrown into instant fame, shocking scandals and dangerous stunts that nearly broke him. But that was only the beginning. How did a kid with no acting background land one of TV's most iconic roles? And what unexpected twists took his life in directions no one saw coming? This is the wild life of Burt Ward, from Sparky to superhero. Long before he ever wore the red vest and green tights of Robin, Burt Ward was already used to standing out. Born Burt John Gervis Jr. on July 6, 1945, in Los Angeles, California, he grew up in a family where entertainment wasn't just a pastime, it was part of the household. His father, Burt Sr., owned and produced a traveling ice show called Rhapsody on Ice. That meant the young boy was exposed to the excitement of performance at an age when most kids were just learning their ABCs. By the time he was 2 years old, little Burt was already lacing up his skates and performing on the ice alongside seasoned adults. In fact, his skills were so unusual for his age that he was featured in a magazine called Strange as It Seems, which highlighted odd or extraordinary human feats. The caption introduced him as the world's youngest professional ice skater, a toddler who could glide, spin, and perform tricks far beyond his years. This early spotlight gave him both confidence and the taste of being singled out as someone different, something that would follow him into adulthood. It was also during this time that he picked up the nickname Sparky. He earned it from a playful stunt. When the rink lights were turned off, he would clap the blades of his skates together, sending sparks into the dark. To the crowd, it was just a cute trick. To Burt, it was proof that even in darkness, he could create a spark. With time, Burt became obsessed with comic books. Not just reading them casually, he used to collect them, trade them with friends, and spend hours poring over dizzying colors and appallingly bad stories. Superman and Superboy were his favorites, and The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves, was his favorite show. For a boy dreaming about superheroes, Superman on the black and white television screen was an electrifying sight. Somehow, those comics and shows planted a seed. He admired the notion of ordinary people becoming extraordinary, of everyday men putting on costumes to fight for justice. It became an innocent childhood love that would prove suddenly prophetic. By high school, Burt's interests extended beyond comics and toward the world of sports. An athletic teenager, Burt dedicated himself to every endeavor. He joined the track, football, and wrestling teams, proving himself a fierce competitor there as well. However, the one area that was to stand out more than the others was the martial arts. Following a karate class, Burt found he could not stop, eventually transitioning into Taekwondo. He certainly wasn't just a weekend warrior. He earned his brown belt, a commitment that took time and discipline. The martial arts training instilled an inner discipline and gave him a sense of focus, physical control, and fast reflexes. These would serve to help him really shine in a room full of aspiring actors, most of whom couldn't throw a convincing punch. Yet, in many senses, what makes the onset of Burt's life so remarkable is that none of this was a straight path to Hollywood. He wasn't acting in plays. He wasn't a theater kid. He wasn't even dreaming of being on television. His childhood was full of skating, sports, comic books, and an occasional sparkle of showbiz through his father's ice productions. But all of those ingredients, his physical agility, his boyish enthusiasm, and his love for superheroes fitted that recipe to augment someone who could credibly walk into the shoes of Robin, the boy wonder. In hindsight, that almost seems scripted, as if fate were writing the first act of Burt's story in whispers. From sparking skates in a dark rink to sparking fights on Gotham's streets, the metamorphosis was not so obvious then. But no amount of skating tricks or taekwondo training could have prepared young Burt for the day he'd meet a man who would change his life forever, a man named Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee and the martial bond. By the mid-1960s, Burt Ward's life looked fairly ordinary from the outside. After graduating from high school, he enrolled in college, earned his realtor's license, and began working for his father's real estate business. He even moved into his own apartment, the kind of place filled with students, dreamers, and aspiring performers. But what seemed like an ordinary step into adulthood was actually the backdrop for one of the most extraordinary friendships of his life. One day, while returning home from taekwondo practice, Burt was stopped by a man who had noticed his routine comings and goings. The stranger asked, "You study martial arts, don't you?" When Burt confirmed, the man smiled and said, "So do I." His name was Bruce Lee. At the time, Bruce wasn't yet the international superstar he would become. He was just another young man, living with his wife Linda and their infant son Brandon in the same apartment complex. The two quickly bonded over their shared passion for martial arts. Burt already had a reputation in his circle as a skilled taekwondo practitioner, but when he saw Bruce in action, he immediately knew he was in the presence of something different. He was on a whole other level, Burt would later recall. Still, the connection wasn't about competition. It was about friendship. The Lees soon invited him to dinner, and Burt found himself welcomed into their family life. He remembered evenings spent in their modest apartment, baby Brandon bouncing in Linda's arms, while Bruce spoke passionately about philosophy, combat, and the discipline behind martial arts. At other times, Bruce invited Burt to join them on outings to Chinatown, where they sampled foods Burt had never tried before and visited the Lees' favorite shops. These weren't moments with a celebrity, they were moments with a friend. Neither man could have known that within a year they'd both be television stars, immortalized in the roles of Robin and Kato. Burt got to spar with Bruce, but realized pretty soon how much they differed from one another in terms of prowess. Burt was good, but Bruce's speed, accuracy, and presence were unlike anything he'd ever felt. Yet Bruce never used this superiority against him. Their sparring was playful, full of teaching moments and encouragement. Bruce respected the enthusiasm Burt brought into the ring, while Burt admired the brilliance Bruce had. This was less a training session and more about sharing between two young men connected by discipline, sweat, and the dreamlike uncertainty of their future. Ironically, martial arts gave him an early advantage as he walked right into the Batman auditions. Little did he know, those sparring and friendly evenings spent with Bruce Lee were shaping up something bigger for him. His athleticism and confident posture, alongside his martial arts skills, would astound casting directors in ways no amount of acting resume could. But their bond had an additional layer. Both were outsiders searching for a way in. Bruce was grappling with Hollywood's racial prejudices, desperately trying to prove that an Asian man could do more than just be a sidekick or a background extra. Burt, on the other hand, was an unknown with no acting training, hoping he might be noticed for no other reason than his audacity. It was there in that apartment complex that two dreamers were sharpening their skills while the rest of the world had no clue about what was coming. For the rest of his life, memories of Bruce Lee remained very vivid for Burt. A friend, a dinner host, a sparring partner, Bruce was the man before fame and legend. And when the world later saw Kato delivering lightning strikes beside the Green Hornet, Burt smiled at the memory of having once worked out across the mat from that same man, not as an opponent, but as a friend. Yet while his bond with Bruce Lee gave him confidence, Burt's true leap into stardom began not with training or friendship, but with a bold decision to walk into an agency's office and demand an audition for Batman. Auditions and accidents. By 1965, Burt Ward had settled into a comfortable routine. He was newly married to Bonnie Lindsay, the daughter of noted composer Mort Lindsay, and he was earning money through his father's real estate business. But deep down, Burt still felt restless. His love of comic books had never faded, and he was fascinated by the idea of superheroes brought to life on television. So when word spread through his apartment building that ABC was planning a new Batman TV series, Burt's ears perked up. There was only one problem. He wasn't an actor. He had no resume, no training, and no connections. The casting process required an agent, and Burt had none. But instead of giving up, he simply decided to walk into a Hollywood talent agency off the street and ask for an audition. The agents were stunned. Here was a young man with no experience, no credentials, and yet the confidence to demand a chance at one of the most sought-after roles in television. They laughed at his boldness, but something about him stuck. He wasn't polished, but he was energetic, likable, and undeniably athletic. When he showed up at the audition, Burt listed his taekwondo training, his background in sports, and his athletic abilities. Casting directors asked him to come back the next day. Then they asked him to come back again. By the third round, they wanted to see what he could do physically. Burt, never shy, offered to demonstrate live sparring. He even brought a friend and a wooden board, which he chopped cleanly in half in front of the producers. The room lit up with excitement. Burt might not have been an actor yet, but he looked and moved like Robin stepped out of a comic book. So, Adam West or Lyle Waggoner was set up to play Batman. The role of Robin was contested between Burt Ward and Peter Dale. So the last chemistry test that Adam and Burt did sealed the deal for everyone. Their banter was very natural, and their energy clicked. So everyone knew they had found their dynamic duo. So everything in his life changed, just like that. He was just 20 years old when he was cast in the role of Robin, the boy wonder. Freeing his fairy tale had a big cost as well. So young and physically trained, the studios thought that he was able to do stunts much like any trained stuntman. So, unlike Adam West, who had a stunt double, Burt did most of the sequences himself. There were many such accidents right from the first week of filming. During one of the sequences, he was supposed to be riding in the Batmobile, and the door flew open mid-turn. Burt almost fell off, but managed to hold on to the gear shift with his little finger. The strain instantly dislocates his finger. He popped it back in and was told they would get him medical help after he finished the scene. Soon after, other events followed. Explosions on set would leave him with ringing ears, and on one occasion, debris from the ceiling would break his nose. In 2 weeks, Burt had been in and out of the emergency room for several stents. Doctors then began to wonder what injuries were odd for a young man who never seemed to stop coming in for stunt-related injuries. After that, the studio had second thoughts about the whole issue of risk, for they realized that their young star might see 3 seasons if this continued. Burt was dazzling in any truly energetic way on camera, and the great danger portrayed in such high-action scenes suited him. The public was falling in love with this enthusiasm and the outrageous use of his catchphrases, "holy," and "that was heavy." Nevertheless, behind the mask, Burt was gradually discovering that fame could sting just as much as glory. The show was an overnight sensation, but as Burt's star rose, his personal life became just as dramatic, filled with adoring fans, broken marriages, and wild encounters that he would later describe in shocking detail. Fame, fans, and fallout. When Batman premiered in January 1966, it exploded onto American television like nothing else before. The campy humor, vibrant colors, and over-the-top villains made it an instant cultural phenomenon. Overnight, Burt Ward went from being an unknown young man with no acting experience to one of the most recognizable faces in the country. At just 20 years old, he had been catapulted into the chaotic world of stardom. At first, Burt's personal life seemed steady enough. He was still married to Bonnie Lindsay, and in late 1966, they welcomed a daughter named Lisa Ann. But the demands of the show, the constant attention, and the pressure of newfound fame placed enormous strain on his young marriage. By 1967, Burt and Bonnie had divorced, leaving him to balance fatherhood with a whirlwind career that allowed little time for stability. Part of that whirlwind came from contractual obligations that stretched far beyond filming. While Burt and Adam West were the stars of the show, their roles didn't stop when the cameras turned off. The studio had a relentless promotional machine, and the actors were required to make personal appearances all across the country. Burt found himself traveling from city to city almost every weekend, donning the Robin costume for parades, shopping mall openings, and school assemblies. One day, he might be smiling for photos in a gymnasium full of children. The next, leading a parade down Main Street as the Boy Wonder. The appearances were grueling but lucrative, providing steady income and constant exposure. Yet they also exposed Burt to an entirely different side of fame. The fans. Children idolized him, adults appreciated the humor of the show, and everywhere he went, crowds gathered to see Batman and Robin in the flesh. But among the cheers and admiration were also groupies. Women who pursued both Adam and Burt with the same intensity as fans might chase rock stars. As he later described in his autobiography, My Life in Tights, Burt discovered that what he thought might be a combination of utterly innocent appearances suddenly turned into something much more adult. For in almost every town, there were women, generally much older than him, occasionally married, who wanted more than just an autograph. He was naive at first, not understanding their intent, but the notes slipped into his hands, and the knocks on his hotel door found Burt immersed in the excesses of celebrity. But there was one story that achieved almost mythical notoriety. Burt was in his hotel room with a woman when knocking began on the door. An enraged man who resided on the other side shouted threats and demanded that Burt come out and face him. When Burt asked the woman if she was married, she said she was not. The man's fury was, however, convincing enough. Burt, panicking, called Adam West in the next room. Adam quipped, "Don't worry, Robin. Batman will save you." But when the stranger turned his anger toward Adam's door, even Adam locked himself inside. He had to run naked through the sliding door just in time as the furious husband, that was who the man was, barged in. It ended with cops, and it left Burt unhinged, a reminder that behind the fun of celebrity were real dangers. "I'm flattered," Burt would say, in that Sweenyette speech of his. Those experiences for Burt were kind of thrilling and at the same time quite destabilizing. For believe it or not, he was just a teenager barely out of his teenage years, but found himself in the life of a mature celebrity. Fame, scandal, and tabloid-worthy encounters. But Burt's challenges weren't just with fans and personal drama. Even his friendship with Bruce Lee would be tested in a high-profile crossover that threatened to turn allies into rivals. Clashes, crossovers, and Kathy. By the second season of Batman, Burt Ward was no longer just a TV star, he was a household name. His catchphrases, his acrobatics, and his energetic chemistry with Adam West had made Robin an icon in his own right. But with bigger success came bigger challenges, and Burt soon found himself at the center of one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes dramas of the series, the crossover with the Green Hornet. The crossover was meant to be a television event, combining two popular shows in a bid to draw massive ratings. On one side were Batman and Robin. On the other, the Green Hornet and his masked partner, Kato, played by none other than Burt's old friend Bruce Lee. On paper, it was perfect. Two duos of crime fighters crossing paths in Gotham, with an inevitable fight to satisfy fans. But what should have been a joyful reunion turned tense. The original script called for Robin to outfight Kato, showcasing him as the winner of their showdown. Bruce, however, refused to go along with it. By now, he had built a reputation as a serious martial artist, and he wasn't about to let his character be shown as weaker than a sidekick in a campy comedy. He insisted that, at the very least, the fight must end in a draw. It was a bold demand, especially for a young actor still trying to establish himself in Hollywood. But anyone who knew Bruce Lee knew he never backed down from principle. Burt later recalled feeling caught in the middle. He worried that Bruce believed he had been promoting himself falsely as a martial arts master. Publicity materials for Batman often exaggerated Burt's credentials, sometimes calling him a black belt in karate, when in fact he was a Taekwondo brown belt still working his way up. It wasn't Burt's doing, it was a result of the studio's marketing. but he feared Bruce might think he was claiming superiority. When they arrived on set, Bruce didn't acknowledge him, and Burt interpreted the silence as hostility. Though tensions mounted toward the end of filming, the day saw its usual share of drama. With the running of the cameras, Bruce charged at Burt so intensely that Burt instinctively jumped back, withdrawing in surprise. "Robin, you look like a big yellow chicken!" shouted one of the cameramen. Everyone broke into laughter. The mood lightened, and that was when Bruce let himself laugh. In that instant, Burt realized that the supposed feud had really just been a practical joke devised by Bruce in order to mess with him and draw a little attention. Congratulations were in order for Bruce, who really was quite happy to be working with the old pal. It was declared a draw, and once the cameras stopped rolling, the assumed rivalry dissolved by way of laughter and hugs. Calmly, one chapter of his life, another storm was brewing. In Season 2, Burt met actress Kathy Kirsch, who played Cornelia in 2 episodes. Cornelia was one of the Joker's dupes in a scheme. Kathy was radiant, charming, and already well known from her roles in The Beverly Hillbillies, Burke's Law, and My Favorite Martian. Burt fell for Kathy instantly. Within a short period of chemistry, they married in 1967. The pairing of Robin and Cornelia seemed like something out of the mind of a fan, but theirs was a real-life and passionate romance. By about the same time, Burt and Kathy were also testing the waters in the music world. Burt released a single, Boy Wonder, I Love You, produced by the eccentric genius Frank Zappa. The song was bizarre, mixing a spoken-word love letter from fans with a pop backing. Kathy had her own single out, too, with Burt producing her recording. Though neither record really made waves on the charts, they were colorful additions to an already eccentric chapter in Burt's long career. Unfortunately, the marriage did not stand up to these pressures. By 1969, with Batman on the way out and Burt typecast into oblivion, Kathy and Burt's marriage came to an end. Their divorce would bring Burt into search once again for some balance in his personal and professional lives. With the bat signal switched off and his marriage ending, Burt now faced the harsh reality of Hollywood's typecasting curse, and life after Robin proved to be even more unpredictable than his days in Gotham. Life after Batman. When Batman was canceled in 1968, after just 3 seasons, Burt Ward faced the nightmare of many TV actors, typecasting. To millions of viewers, he wasn't Burt Ward, he was Robin, the boy wonder. That fame, while dazzling, became a trap. Casting directors couldn't see beyond the green tights and youthful sidekick image, leaving Burt struggling to build a career outside Gotham. The years immediately after the show were tough. While Adam West also battled typecasting, he at least had the prestige of playing Batman. As Robin, Burt's problem was worse. He was forever seen as the sidekick. He took whatever roles he could, often in low-budget horror or sci-fi films with titles like Scream, Evelyn, Scream, and Robo-Chick. Though he worked steadily, none of these projects carried the cultural weight of his Robin days. There were bright spots. Burt continued voicing Robin in animated series, keeping the character alive for Saturday morning audiences. For fans, hearing his voice was a nostalgic bridge to the beloved live-action show. He also remained inseparable from Adam West. The two became a fixture at conventions, expos, and public appearances. Decade after decade, they stood side by side, embodying Batman and Robin long after the cameras stopped rolling. Burt's personal life has closely followed the ups and downs of his professional career. After divorcing Kathy Kirsch in 1983, he married actress Mariana Torchia in 1985, but the marriage ended in 4 years. He continued to appear in small films and television projects, but for most people in the know, that dude who did Robin everywhere he went, the shadow of the cape followed him. In 1990, despite all the interruptions and distractions in life, he married Tracy Posner, finding steadiness for the first time. They would have a daughter named Melody Lane Ward, and then discover something they both really shared, that would radically change Burt's life animal rescue. While he was still honoring his Robin legacy by attending conventions and meeting fans, his heart, though, had turned in a direction quite far from anything Hollywood offers. The events never changed Adam West's association. They'd take leisurely tours through the passing generations, smiling pleasantly at one another. Into the 2000s, they were still reminiscing, cracking jokes, and claiming their little spots in pop culture history. As he often admitted, Batman limited his career, but gave him two things he'd never trade for anything: the lifelong brotherhood of Adam and an ever-present fan base. When Adam died in 2017, Burt mourned not just a co-star, but a dear friend who had traversed more than 50 years of his life. By now, Burt's second act was being developed. A second act few could expect or even imagine. The boy wonder had become just a name on television. He sank into something deeper, a hero to needy animals, and left a legacy beyond Hollywood. And that's how Burt Ward, once the boy wonder of Gotham, transformed into a real-world savior, not for people this time, but for thousands of dogs whose lives he would change forever. From sidekick to savior. By the 1990s, Burt Ward had already lived a remarkable life. Childhood skating prodigy, martial artist, TV icon as Robin, tabloid figure, and struggling actor. But just when his career seemed destined for nostalgia tours and convention appearances, he reinvented himself completely as an animal rescuer. In 1994, Burt and his wife, Tracy Posner, founded Gentle Giants Rescue and Adoptions, dedicated to saving large dog breeds often overlooked in shelters. St. Bernards, Great Danes, Irish Wolfhounds, and Mastiffs, breeds frequently abandoned or euthanized because of their size and needs, found a champion in the wards. What began as a modest effort soon grew into one of the largest giant breed rescue programs in the U.S. Over the years, they rescued and rehomed more than 15,000 dogs, often housing dozens at a time in their own home. Visitors described the sight of the one-time boy wonder surrounded by towering canines as both chaotic and heartwarming. Yet Burt and Tracy's mission didn't stop at rescue. Convinced poor nutrition was partly to blame, they invested more than $3 million of their own money into research, eventually creating Gentle Giants dog food. Unlike many commercial brands, it emphasized natural ingredients, low fat, and balanced nutrients aimed at longevity. It was incredible. Dogs that generally lived less than 10 years suddenly began living up to 15, 18, and even 20 years. Pet owners all over the country began reporting these same results, and soon the food was sold through other major retailers such as Walmart and Chewy. It was a miracle food for dog nutrition, allowing families to spend some extra years with their furry family members, according to all the reviews. For Burt, it felt like destiny to be in the position he was in. During interviews, he would often speak about it, like when he was Robin, once the sidekick helping Batman save Gotham, now the real-life hero saved dogs from early death. It's like being a superhero for animals, he would say. On the other hand, unlike quick publicity from television, this has a permanent and real-time effect. The contrast was remarkable. Fans remembering him now once again for crying, "Holy smokes, Batman!" saw in him the spirit of a true animal welfare advocate. Gentle Giants was not merely a hobby, it was his life. The boy who once idolized Superman became a man showing the superhero spirit through compassion and action. Even so, the Robin legacy was never far from Burt's mind. He went to conventions and signed autographs, regaling attendees with stories. After West died, Burt honored that friendship with tributes, celebrating through talks. Unlike Adam, who just died, Burt redecorated his life with purpose. Burt Ward proved that sidekicks can become heroes in their own right. From tights to tail wags, from the Batcave to 1,000 families whose dogs lived longer and healthier. He will always be remembered as the boy wonder, but more importantly, as a man who turned compassion into a calling and thereby forged his own timeless legacy as a savior. From child skating prodigy to Robin on Batman 66, from Bruce Lee's friend to dog rescuer, Burt Ward's life shows reality can outshine fiction. Do you think he'll be remembered more as the boy wonder or for saving thousands of dogs? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this look back, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and check out the next video on your screen for more hidden stories behind Hollywood's most unforgettable icons.